Hello, good evening, and welcome everybody to tonight's Pint of Science. Tonight we have got two fantastic speakers who are going to talk to us a little bit about digital innovations in healthcare and help us to understand a little bit more about how our embrace of the digital world is going to ensure that we have a healthier and fitter life in the future. So we'll start straight away with our first speaker. Our first speaker is Professor Alamgir Hossain. He is a professor of artificial intelligence and our research lead at the Centre of Digital Innovation here at Teeside University. And he's going to talk to us a little bit now about how AI is helping us in terms of diagnosis of diseases and perhaps reassure us that not all AI is out to destroy us. So Alamgir, over to you.
Thank you, Tim. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Let me upload the slide.
Are we all sorted? Are we good to go? Brilliant. And just to reassure everybody who's watching, after our two speakers, we'll have an opportunity for questions and to engage with our topics and our speakers tonight. So if your slides are ready, Alamgir, over to you.
Yep. All right. Okay. As Tim indicated, I'll focus AI-enabled healthcare system, particularly personalized one, how we can use mobile phone and AI. Our particular focus will be on diagnosis and care model. So 4 core elements in the presentation. I thought to give some impression about how AI works and how this way we can utilize it for various diagnosis and personalized care model. And some of the mobile enabled expert system with personalized visual model and future care model will be in my presentation. So we can see AI all around us. As AI is basically algorithm, sometimes we don't see physically, but when you see mobile, there are many mobile applications use AI. When you see robot use AI. You can see manufacturing using heavily car manufacturing using heavily AI-enabled robot, and also driverless car. We all know that driverless car also use AI heavily. Now, what is AI? Probably a little bit impression so that it will help to understand how AI can help in diagnosis and care model. So we usually say computer system where we use human intelligence, particularly for visual perception, speech recognition, decision making, or translation. So what is this system means? System means like human body. If we see something, we react. System can do similar way. If we give the input, system can react based on the algorithm. And as I said, it's like human body, the way human body works. So it's not only human intelligence, we also use nature-inspired intelligence, usually called swarm intelligence for artificial intelligence, particularly for optimization. And some of these processes related to physical, chemical, social, and biological system. As the example you can see here, ant colony or bird flocks. They are not actually flying in sequential form, because if they fly in parallel form, they can search wider spectrum for food, and colony also works and together to solve a problem or take their food one place to another place. A simple example for fusion, for instance, if we want to find a particular fruit from a basket of fruits, what do? We use different rules. And for example, we want orange, so we might say, okay, what is the color, what's the size, shape, texture, and volume? That gives us orange. Similarly, mango. And similar strategy actually use doctors. They use nice rules to classify and make decision based on treatment. So NICE is basically National Institute of Care and Care Excellence, Health and Care Excellence. And similar strategy for different purpose, we use machine learning algorithm. For instance, if we have different skin diseases, so these are healthy, these are different diseases, and these are the name of these. And if we use machine learning algorithm to train these different type of, let's say, healthy and unhealthy images, that can actually learn based on inputs and outputs. And once it is trained, then it will be like trained algorithm. And if we give any new input, it might tell us what is this, whether it is benign or malignant. This is the same way dermatologists learn and then identify type of skin diseases. So machine learning can do similar type of work. The third element is the optimization, where we find always optimal path using various parameters like time, cost, distance, roadwork, history, and so on. And if we look at the way doctors conduct best treatment for minimum side effect, is pretty similar where they also conduct this. In some cases, we use AI algorithm to solve similar problem. So here is an example how we can use mobile phone and AI together for colorimetric test. As you all know that most of the pathological tests are basically colorimetric tests. People can use ELISA plate. This is an example testing tuberculosis disease using mobile phone. So when we use any, let's say, sputum with a chemical that may react and change the color so that we can analyze the color. And similar strategy we also use for paper strip, or if someone take urine, for instance, in a transparent test tube, add a particular chemical that may generate color, and analyzing the color will give answer whether someone has a specific type of disease. Here, this is an example for TB testing using mobile phone, where PP says positive and NN says negative. Similar thing can be done for sputum, saliva, urine, and blood test. And if you want to explore further, this is a particular published document you can explore further. The next example is like a retinal image analysis using mobile phone. So if we use mobile with microscopic lens, we can analyze a retinal image, and that can give whether the retina has got any disease, for instance, diabetes, heart disease, cataract, and Drosen, and many other diseases. Similar strategy can be used for skin disease analysis, as I indicated earlier. So if we have mobile AI-enabled mobile application, mobile can analyze skin disease. So if you want to explore further about these type of solution, there are published documents to explore. So what we will see in future, many of these probably we have to do on our own. As you see, the challenges we have during this COVID-19 period, there are many patients at home than in hospital. So we all have to do many activities in future on our own, like self-diagnosis. So our future model will be personalized, predictive, preventive, and prescriptive. And one particular example here, for instance, self-diagnosis. There might be mobile with many devices to do self-diagnosis, like additional device. We indicated microscopic lens, thermal or infrared camera, spectrometer, handle X-ray, biosensors, even DNA sequence analyzer. And the input may be from detection or analysis, symptom related detection and analysis, skin or retinal image, urine, saliva. This is what I indicated earlier. And there might be game or gamified model for training so that we all can learn and use mobile phone to do our own diagnosis. And the similar strategy for human can be used for animal, can be used for agriculture as well. This slide indicates the powerful AI, IoTs, and mobile together, how the future will be shaping us most likely. So if we go to doctor, they usually ask our personal information, height, weight, conditions, like if someone has blood pressure, diabetes, lifestyle, for example, someone has diet, exercise, family history. And these are the information they capture. So mobile can capture similar information. And mobile also can capture DNA sequence using some form of machine learning algorithm, and also colorimetric test input, as I indicated earlier. So there might be small devices for this sequence analysis as well. And also expert knowledge at tier. So if we consider multiple doctors' knowledge at tier and different IoT devices in the body to sense it, it could be something like this, and where we can think of different outcome out of that. So inside the mobile, we might see a mechanism like that, where we can play with that to see how actually inside the body is changing. So it will be like a visual model. So that may help in generating recommended lifestyle, analyze predictive risk, and guide, and so on. So let's look at this example, that how it works. So for instance, we want to see what happens when we smoke. And if we show 2 years, 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, that will demonstrate the impact, how carbon monoxide goes through our blood and damage our lung and so on. On the other hand, if I for simple demonstration, that if someone eat burger and fries every day, what will be the impact in 2 years down the line, 4 years down the line, how the body will grow. And you can see on the other hand, the heartbeat monitoring is struggling because of higher blood pressure and so on. And similar elements, if we consider, let's say 10 years, and then if we say, okay, we want to conduct exercise and see what is happening inside my body. Currently, we see when we use mobile for various purposes for this, but if we see here that how it works when we exercise, how it removes fats and making our body shape better and so on. It might be linked to different diseases, whereas this is just simple indication of heart, but you can think of kidney and other diseases to demonstrate impact of different scenario when we have that particular scenario in our case. Now, moving to my last slide. Thank you very much, and I'll be looking for question and answer session. Thank you.
Thanks very much. That was really interesting and a really good insight into, I think, the direction of travel in terms of this sort of work. And I have to say, from a personal perspective, I feel a bit bad now because I've literally had burgers for tea, so I'm a bit concerned about my own well-being. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to our second speaker now, and our second speaker is Dr. Phil Cossam. Phil is one of our excellent lecturers here in the School of Health and Life Sciences at Teeside University. He's one of the first people in the country to generate a digital X-ray image, and he is also, amongst his other titles, a National Teaching Fellow. He's director of ShadeAware Limited, a developer of virtual radiography, and which is a radiography computer simulation which over 180 universities across the world currently use in their learning and teaching. And Phil is going to talk us through a little bit about how the advances in digital technology are helping us with medical imaging. So Phil, over to you.
Thanks, Tim. So I'm going to the beginning of my slides. Right, so in a nutshell, the first half of my talk can be summed up in this slide. So on the left-hand side, we've got X-rays, and X-rays are an electromagnetic radiation. They're more powerful than light, but similar, and they operate in a much smaller scale, which will become quite important. We obviously have a person in the middle, which we can't create a digital human without reference to a real person. And on the right-hand side, we've got data, and that is our digital human in a computer memory held as memory. So basically, how do we create a digital human? Well, when you initially look at a person, they look fairly substantial, like these rugby players. It doesn't look like anything's going to get through them. But actually, if we look at people at a different scale, if we start to zoom in on a particular area, then what we discover is as we get smaller and smaller, we start to get to the limits of light microscopy, and then we get smaller again, and eventually we'll get to electron microscopy limits. And when we get down to the nanotechnology level, where we're looking at nanometer scale, then we start to see something interesting. We start to see space appear, open areas where there isn't really any material. So there's plenty of space here for something very, very small to pass through and into a person. And as we get to the limits of nanotechnology, we start to see molecules forming. And those molecules are now getting towards the X-ray scale. I said that X-rays were very, very small. They operate on very, very small scales. In fact, they operate on the scale of picometers, which are even smaller than nanometers. And here we are at the atomic level. And this is what your body looks like to an X-ray. Basically, there's a load of empty space, and all that can be seen is electrons and subatomic particles. So those bell-shaped, dumbbell-shaped clouds of are electrons fizzing around inside an atom. And you can see that if you were an X-ray meeting a person, there's plenty of opportunity for you to pass straight through. Now, a person is made up of elements, and those elements have varying amounts of electrons. Here's our periodic table, and the elements that are particularly important in building a person are the ones that I've put a yellow box around. So not that many elements actually make up about 90% of the elements in a body. And of course, the classics are carbon and hydrogen. And you can see that the carbon atom has about 6 electrons, hydrogen atom has about 1. So they're not going to be much of an obstacle for our X-rays. It's unlikely our X-ray will meet an electron when it gets to a carbon atom. So if we look down to the ones that are more massive, the ones that have got more electrons, then we notice the one that's the most massive, that's commonly found in our body, is calcium with 20 electrons. And of course, we all know that calcium is concentrated in our bones. So that's why when the first X-ray was taken, and this is a picture of it by Röntgen, he X-rayed his wife's hand in 1895. And she had a really cool quote. She said, when she saw the picture for the first time, "I have seen my death," she said. Now, you can see that the calcium in the bones of her hand cast a shadow, and that's what we can see. And in fact, the gold wedding ring that she had on her finger cast an even bigger shadow because gold has even more electrons than calcium does. So it's electrons that really stop X-rays. And we can use that to typify our body in some way or other. Now, things have moved on considerably since 1895 in the X-ray world. And what I'm showing you now is a brand new CT scanner being tested for the first time, running at 180 revolutions per minute. And it's creating an X-ray beam, but not from a static position. It's spinning that X-ray beam round while the X-rays are being generated. So the patient would sit in the middle of that and be X-rayed from every different direction. So we had a static beam giving us a static picture, but now in modern times, we often have a rotating beam of X-rays starting from the top of the patient, transversing through the patient, and being detected the other side of the patient. So this is our transmission data. And once we've got that data, then we can hold it in a computer and we can build a body. Now, here's a body built using Minecraft. And the reason I've got this picture up is because you can see that the body is built of little blocks. And we have to choose when we're building a digital human, how big the blocks are going to be for our digital human. Because once we've got this transmission data, we have to put it into units, building blocks. And usually we can use, say, a millimeter square block. So a millimeter cube would be the block of lowest common denominator for our digital human. So a human is roughly 62 million cubic millimeters in size. So we would have 62 million building blocks, and each one of those would have a value based on how well it transmits X-rays. And once we know the value of that building block, then we can work out what sort of chemical, effectively, that building block is made of. So that's the first half of my talk, a whiz through how we build a digital human. So that happens all the time throughout the world, of course, and many of you may well have had a scan of some sort, and you may actually have some digital data stored in a hospital somewhere, which is a little bit of you digitized. But at Teeside, what we thought a few years ago, probably getting on 20 years ago now, was we've got this digital data. What we really want to do is to create a digital X-ray world for various reasons, which I'll go into. So this is a summary of the final part of my slide talk. So we've got digital data on the left. We've got some very smart computer algorithms written by us at Teeside in the middle. And that gets us to a computer game that we can use to teach people how to X-ray patients. So, okay, so what's the problem then? We have 60 to 80 student radiographers a year. And of course, an X-ray machine like this is very expensive, and it's also a bit dangerous. So it'd be a nightmare to try and get all of those students time practicing with this machine. So that's a big problem. The other big problem is, if you look at what's ringed in yellow here, this is legally about the only thing we can actually X-ray with it. You know, it doesn't look much like a patient, does it? It's just a lump of plastic. So that doesn't really help the student get the idea of how it is to X-ray a real person. And we can't, of course, X-ray a person because that would be very dangerous. So we're limited, aren't we? What we do have at the university, though, is lots and lots of computers and computer labs for students to sit at and use. So the idea was born 20 odd years ago. Why don't we take a digital human, create some computer code, and then allow all our students to sit in front of a computer and play with an X-ray room on their own. So we worked on this for a few years, and we had a very talented MSc student called Neil Willis, who came up with the breakthrough code that worked really well. And this is a picture of Neil about 20 years ago. He's lost his hair since then. But basically, he wrote some code which could track imaginary X-ray photons through our digital human. And this is the tracks of those photons being visualized. Of course, it was much faster than this. Billions of photons creating a history going through the person and being captured on an imaginary detector. Here's a student using the ultimate computer game that is based on that code. And so basically the student's positioning everything up. They're actually positioning the patient, the human data. Digital human data is represented by that avatar there. And then all the other parts of the X-ray room are represented in the three-dimensional world. And then the student will set the exposure parameters and then hit the button, and it will actually provide you with an image as if you had X-rayed a real person. And that is made up of these fake photons, if you like. So you can see how powerful that would be as a learning tool. And in fact, here is our students using the software during the pandemic. This is they weren't allowed to go into the hospital to train. So we actually were able to have them in labs, socially distanced, wearing masks, and practicing on the digital humans and actually getting some skills so that they could keep going with their studies, so they could become the radiographers of the future, treating real patients in the future. So that's a big thumbs up, I think, for our efforts and our work here at Teeside University. So thanks very much for listening.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Phil. That was really interesting and a great example, I think, of the direction of travel. So we've had two really interesting talks summarising some of the work that we've got going on here at Teeside University in that kind of Venn diagram of bringing together healthcare and kind of the digital world. It's an opportunity now for any of you who are listening to ask some questions from our panel, anything from very small specific questions to super controversial questions. We're open to them all. So I know we've got a team behind the scenes that are monitoring some of the questions. And I think while that's going on, I might just take chair's prerogative and just ask the first question, I think. And, oh no, okay, I'm gonna take a step back. Our first question from Paul then, how can we ensure privacy and security are ensured in digital health apps? Perhaps Alamgir, we'll start with you at that one. How can we ensure privacy and security in our digital health apps?
Thank you for the question. This is really a serious issue. And naturally, when we consider any activity, we need to think of many health, privacy, or security-related aspects, for instance, including GDPR. So usually, if we think about when we are having transaction with bank, it immediately do some form of, let's say, encryption, so that third party cannot see that. And similar strategy can be used for health as well. So when a particular user is using a particular mobile app for diagnosis or communicating with health professionals, the system can immediately encrypt and avoid third-party communication or interruption in the communication media. So there are various opportunities like the way bank works, similar strategy can be used. I hope that will give some impression.
Great, thank you. Phil, was there anything that you want to add to that? I know your work is slightly different in this respect.
It is a bit, but obviously medical imaging, we have to treat patient confidentiality very seriously, never share images, and we have to anonymize and pseudonymize. And in fact, the digital data that we use, we have a massive database here at Teeside University where we went through a big piece of work to strip the data from the names and addresses and dates of birth, so that we can actually get students using that data without fear of identifying the patients involved.
Great, thanks very much. And actually, the question I was about to ask was related to this, so I'm going to follow up with this one. And it really relates to a point that you mentioned, Phil, in your talk, in that we've got this build-up of digital information and digital data. And again, I guess my question is, what do you both think is going to happen with all of this digital remnants of ourselves that are collecting in various databases around the world?
Yeah, it's really interesting. It used to be a case of having to get rid of the data because we had limited storage space. But because storage space has become very cheap, it's now actually, not that big a problem. The problem is the same as it is in sort of Google, really, where people have the right to be forgotten, I suppose, and we need to have retention strategies so that we only hold stuff for as long as we absolutely have to.
Great, and I guess in many ways it's thinking about the digital data in the same way we think about physical tissue that we would collect about people. Mm-hmm. Our next question is from Kelly, and Phil, one's very much for you. And the question is, why is it dangerous when having an X-ray?
Okay, yeah, well, Kelly's answered her own question a little bit there. So the reason it's dangerous, it isn't always dangerous. I don't want to put you off having a necessary image. There's always a balance of risk versus benefit. And we're getting used to the idea of balancing risk, aren't we? Because of the pandemic, we're starting to think, well, there's some risks we're willing to take. The benefits outweigh the risk. And the question's gone. But basically, Kelly had said that, is it because of the electrons? And that is the correct answer. So if an X-ray photon were to hit an electron, then what happens is the electron gets ejected from the atom. The atom then becomes what's called a free radical. It becomes an ion, and that ion can then go and actually have some sort of chemical reaction with something nearby. And depending, if that chemical reaction is inconsequential, then there won't be any problem. But if it happens to be in a very important part of the cell, a very important part of the DNA, then that could potentially start a chain reaction, which could potentially lead to some sort of consequence. And that's why we try not to use radiation, ionizing radiation, unless we absolutely have to.
Great. Thanks, Phil. Okay, our next question from Aidan. And I think, Alamgir, this one's perhaps more for you. As we place more decisions in AI techniques, will there be a public resistance to using these apps as their decisions fall further into the realm of black box modeling and we seek truly explainable AI?
Yeah, I think this is the trend that explainable AI is taking over. But in many cases, decision is not just by technology. Decision in many cases works as an aid for specialists or oncologists or doctors, so that they can see what are the potential decisions they can make. We are not saying that we will be replacing experts. We are saying that we are providing providing an aid to support the expert so that they can make more accurate decisions, and they can ensure that the decision they are making, there are reasons behind it. There are clearly explainable outcomes behind it.
Great, thank you. Question from Helen, and I think, Phil, this one's for you. Do your students still need to use an actual X-ray machine, or is it the principles that they need to know?
Okay, yeah, good question, Helen. So the students do still need to use a real X-ray machine just to feel the heft and the weight and the physical presence of it. And also they need to have role play with a real person, because obviously our simulation isn't designed to deal with communication issues. And that's a massive part, of course, of any healthcare program. You know, we don't want to be technicians with our nose in a book. We want to be warm, caring people, you know, who actually are dealing with a person in front of us. And so that whole area of training has to be with a person, and it has to be with a real X-ray room, so that the simulator helps people understand what's going on and gives them some basic sort of common sense around what projections work and what projections don't, and of course learning anatomy. These are the sorts of things that we get from our computer simulator, but there's no real substitute for clinical placement time in a hospital environment, dealing with real people and getting to know them and getting to know what helps them to go through the experiences they have to go through.
And is it something similar, Alamgir, with teaching using AI as well?
Yeah.
Yeah, great. So our next question from Kelly. Will this, so in terms of the health apps, I think this is, will this be for patients or medical professionals to use? And all of these health apps, does it take away that personal level of care? And what if patients have multiple conditions? So maybe if we start with the first one, Alamgir, are these health app tool and AI tools for us to use on our own phones, or are they for professionals to use?
Well, it's both. We consider some sort of verification. For instance, if we develop an application with hundreds of expert knowledge, and this is basically verifying by the expert that the system is working. So testing and validation always over there. On top of that, when a decision is coming through app, it should be verified by an expert as well. Particularly in serious case, this is very important. And the other issue is when we consider comorbidity, multimorbidity relative issue, which indicated here, and it's very important point. Even a particular specialist is finding quite difficult to make a decision, because one expert is in a particular area. But if someone, oncologist, for example, trying to take decision for diabetes, oncology, and heart disease together, it is quite challenging for an individual expert. So therefore, using technology to support them will reduce overhead. For instance, instead of using a team of multiple expertise, they can then use the app which has got this team expertise to have immediate support. Of course, they can also verify with the other experts whether it is making right decision. But yes, in multimorbidity or comorbidity issue, this is very, very useful if we have that type of application. But that type of application is still not there in full measure.
And how do you think that these apps interact with that kind of personal level of care that we're providing?
Well, currently we can see there are many IoT devices people use. So these IoT devices communicate with mobile. Mobile can give some sort of indication how many steps you take or what is blood pressure and what are the other health issues. These are slowly growing because we need people's confidence. And in many cases, our medical doctors, they start using this as aid. Previously, they were a bit reluctant. Now they can see the opportunity that while there are various challenges together, this aid is very useful.
Super, thank you. And just that final part of Kelly's question, then very quickly, how, I guess at the moment, how good, reliable are these AI methods for dealing with multiple conditions?
Yeah, so when we consider multi-morbidity issue, is quite complex to use any medicine. Because if we consider 5 different conditions and we need 5 different type of medicine, now if we try to optimize it, that we want to reduce the amount of medicine to reduce the side effect. So this is usually an optimization problem. And for human brain, if it is 2 parameters, it is possible to optimize, but more than 2 parameters, human brain always find difficult to optimize. So therefore, having AI-enabled solution for multi-morbidity and multi-medicine are very, very important here.
Great, thank you. Now I saw another question from Helen pop up there. Here we go. A question for both. I think maybe Phil will start with you. What do you feel then is the future of healthcare?
Okay, yeah. So what I've shown you today was one method of creating a digital human, which was the use of X-rays to transmit through a patient's body. Now, we have already moved to a situation where we can use 2 beams of X-rays and transmit 2 beams of X-rays through the patient, one very low energy and one very high energy. And that way we get 2 data points instead of 1 for each of the building blocks of our digital human. And that gives us much more detail about the chemical makeup of that building block. So that's the near future, because that's already here. You know, we've already got one of those scanners in the Northeast, and we will have many more. Next, we're also combining the data from, say, X-ray transmission in a CT scanner with the data from something like an MRI scan, which is looking at the magnetism of the body in the same way. So when you combine 2 different ways of looking at the body, you get 2 different data sets. You can put those 2 data sets together, and that is really powerful. So the future is multimodality. You know, lots, as Alamgir has said, you get lots of data, put it all together, and it may be baffling for a human, but a computer can sort that out, and that can give us really interesting insights that we're not yet there. But the future is bright, I think.
Brilliant, thanks, Phil. Alamgir, how about you?
Yeah, particularly when we consider a personalized care model, which NHS is targeting by 2024-25, that we want to see personalized care model. It is quite challenging. For instance, when we see the cancer treatment and chemotherapy is using body mass index, rather actual problem or actual size of the problem or different stage of the tumor tissues and tumors, this is quite challenging still. And here we can use various AI algorithms for DNA sequence, for understanding the overall scenario and optimize the drug based on that, so that we can maximize the benefit and reduce the side effect. So therefore, personalized care model still is the most important element to ensure we are treating properly, having minimum side effect.
Great, thank you. Another question, here we go. Will it ever be like in Star Trek at some point with digital scanning to diagnose and treat a patient all in one go? Well,
yeah, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Idiocracy, but in the movie Idiocracy, they have a patient go into a scanner, and instead of giving you an image, a piece of paper like a till receipt comes out of the scanner telling you, what the answer is. And, the imaging, we call our profession medical imaging, but there is a possibility in the future that the image is only there for our benefit. There's no reason for the data to be turned into an image if the data can be turned into a diagnosis instead. And so I think there is a possibility that we might move to a point where a machine doesn't actually produce a lot of images. At the moment, for example, breast MRI, people go for a mammogram and they get 2 images. And that's human, that's possible for a human to read. But people go for an MRI of the breast and over 1,000 images are produced. And the data is so huge, it takes ages for someone to read that. So, it's possible that actually that we're inundated with images, and it's better for the machine to actually come up with some AI recommendations based on the data.
Alamgir.
Yeah, I think Phil indicated the power of AI, particularly for image processing. There is nothing equivalent to that. Because we can see what is happening in different reports that by looking the images, 3 experts, even their error rate about 20-30%. And having AI-enabled aid to analyze the images, giving almost like 99% accuracy. So that brings huge opportunity to use AI as an aid. There are different challenges that if we don't train the algorithm properly with proper images, there is always a gap. So that's not problem with the algorithm, that's problem with the data we are providing. So therefore, adding accurate or precise data, AI can give huge opportunity to support our digital technology, particularly for health domain. And this is the way we can make it more accurate, precise, personalized, and our side effect will be minimized.
Brilliant. Thank you. Well, I think that's probably a great place to end things. That was our final question. And I think that kind of look to the future is a very positive place to end on. I would like to thank both of our speakers, Professor Alamgir Hossain and Dr. Phil Cossam, for 2 really interesting talks and the great discussion just now, and to thank the people at home, in your offices, wherever you might be, for taking part, asking your questions, and listening to us as well. If you're free tomorrow night as well, Teeside University are hosting a second event, this time called You're Nicked, Catching the Criminals, and well, hopefully we might see you there then. Otherwise, thank you very much, everybody, and have a good evening.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Pete.